WNST. Now we're getting ready for purple-less football here this weekend, but they are playing football in other places. This guy covers a team and has covered the National Football League as well as anyone over the last 3 decades at the New York Daily News. You've probably seen him on Inside the NFL as well as some other places, and here on WNST. We welcome him back. He's written a book called Brady versus Manning, and the New York Times called it the definitive best-selling account of the greatest rivalry in the NFL. And meanwhile, the little brother is still out there trying to get it done, and Tom Brady's still getting it done, and we may still have another Manning versus Brady war. We welcome Gary Myers back on from the New York Daily News. You can also follow him out on Twitter at Gary Myers, NYDN. Here we go again, Eli Manning on another potential wild card run here, right, Gary?
Well, he's proven he can do it. 2007, 2011, he had to win 3 playoff games to get to the Super Bowl, and that tends to overshadow that his other 3 playoff appearances were one and dones. So in his first 12 years, it's kind of a bizarre playoff history or career in that the only playoff games this guy's ever won are the 2 years they won the Super Bowl. Otherwise, he's 0-3, and the other years he didn't make the playoffs. But, the Giants, they really feel they can make a run here, and their defense is playing well enough that it's certainly a possibility.
You know, you've written books here about Brady and Manning, and I know you're working on a father's book with quarterbacks, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Eli Manning thing, for you to have been there from the beginning when, he and the old man made a noise about the Chargers, and he was supposed to be a Charger, all that sort of, forgotten about to some degree, but you said overshadowed, and, that's really the story of Eli Manning's life. I remember seeing him play down at Vaught Hemingway Stadium down in at Ole Miss. I flew into Oxford and Memphis 15 years ago, whenever it was, and he was overshadowed even then, right? Just in the SEC. That's the story of his career.
Well, it's kind of like his personality also. He's a low-key guy. He never really says anything that generates any headlines.
He's a good-natured kid, though, right? I mean, maybe even a better sense of humor than his brother to some degree, right?
Well, I think they both behind the scenes are incredible practical jokers. I wrote a lot about that in the Brady Manning book about Peyton being an all-pro practical joker. Eli does not show a lot of his personality publicly, but his teammates really love him, and he is a pretty funny guy. He doesn't let you see that a lot. And just this week, when he was asked about the receivers going down to Miami after the game in Washington on Sunday night, and we've made a big deal about it in New York this week, and whether it's Odell Beckham and all these guys were focused on it, and so I asked Eli the question this week, and how's he feel about it? And in a great deadpan, he just starts saying, I'm really disappointed. Around our team, we really talk about preparation, and I'm really surprised at these guys that they just didn't bring the proper clothes to Miami, because those pictures of the players on the boat, they were wearing jeans and boots, and they were shirtless because they didn't bring any T-shirts. So if you saw it, the way Eli delivered it and how he gave it the build-up, as if he actually was going to criticize the players and then tried to make a joke about it, it was his way of trying to fuse the situation that it actually has been pretty volatile here in New York this week, and whether or not these players had lost their focus and their commitment by taking a little vacation less than a week, prior to what for most of these players is the biggest game of their careers.
Well, I mean, New York is also, a place you could get into trouble on New Year's Eve if you chose to do that at 28 degrees instead of 81 degrees. But, that's a New York thing, though. That's part of, you've covered it forever. You're not going to sneak off to Miami and put pictures on Instagram and not have people say, don't you have a football game in 6 days?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm a traditionalist, or maybe it's just a generation gap between me and these players now. But I just didn't think that was the way to show everybody you're all in on trying to get to a Super Bowl by flying to Miami late Sunday night, staying up all night because they were pictured at 6:00 in the morning with Justin Bieber, and then being on some kind of boat on Monday. And
I'm on a
they were
boat.
back in town. I'm sorry.
No, I was singing a song. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm on a boat.
Okay, and then they were back in time to report, for when they needed to be there on Tuesday morning, and so as far as the players are concerned, no harm, no foul. They didn't get into any trouble. They didn't break any team rules. They didn't break any laws, and that's all true. But
John Harbaugh wouldn't like that here. I promise you that, right? And Bill Belichick wouldn't allow that in New England. So there is that, right?
Well, listen, we don't know what Gronk did over the years on days off, and listen, I agree that players on their day off when they're adults, they should be able to do what they want. And I wouldn't have a problem with it during the regular season. And if the Giants had a bye week instead of having to play on Sunday in Green Bay, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. Although, if you remember the whole Tony Romo Cabo incident in 2007, we all criticized Romo, but he's a quarterback and he should have been around, for the entire 2 weeks, getting ready for their first playoff game. And it's just like, Nestor, the optics on it are just horrible.
Oh, and especially if they lose, right? I mean, you lose next week. Why open yourself up to that, to being questioned about your commitment during the biggest week of the year? I don't disagree with you, but I also know knuckleheads will be knuckleheads, and the people that want to be on the front page of your newspaper seem to find their way there as much as they kick and scream the whole way to get there. You're down on a boat with Justin Bieber on New Year's Day, and you got to play football in 6 days. Guys like you are going to write about it, and if you lose, it's going to be what's talked about for the next 8 months, and the coach has to deal with that, and so does the owner, so to speak.
And and here's the thing: is that Justin Bieber there and Johnny Manziel, the human train wreck, was in that same club. Whether the players hung out with him or not, I don't know. But I always believe that nothing good happens after midnight, and I always tell my kids that. Do you really need to come home at 2:00 in the morning? The only thing that's going to have me 12 and 2 is probably something bad. And so I've added one thing to my feelings of nothing good happens after midnight is nothing good happens hanging out with Justin Bieber.
After midnight, yes.
After midnight, so you get the double whammy there. I just think that players, if the Giants should happen to get to the Super Bowl, they'll have a bye week, and I'm sure the coach will give them a couple of days off. They could have gone down to Miami then. If they lose on Sunday in Green Bay, they could have gone down to Miami on Monday and nobody would have cared. Or if they just wanted to maybe be professionals and wait to go down to Miami after the Super Bowl, that would probably be okay too. But to do it, 6 days before you're playing, for many of them is the biggest game of their careers. It's for many of them is their first playoff game ever. I just don't. I don't know what the reasoning, Beckham is saying it helped them get focused and recharge their bat. Come on.
Gary Myers joining us here from New York Daily News. The book has been out for now a year, and it's still a great book in Brady and Manning, and still might be a Brady and Manning story coming up here. Gary's going to be out in Green Bay this weekend. Of course, the Green Bay Packers, the host at 4:40 on Sunday against the Giants. Gary, I had you on. I had most of the Giants beat writers on. It feels like 5 minutes ago, but it was early October when the Ravens really ran the boat onto the side of the rails up there in New York in back-to-back weeks against the Giants and the Jets. Odell Beckham got the best of them that day, but I remembered a lot of disappointed people with the Giants at that point, and it certainly at that point looked like they would not be a playoff team in any way. They were just trying to be a 500 team, and all of those defensive additions that were added in the offseason and the big money additions, they weren't looking so good in early October, and now that we enter January, they are the core reason that the Giants are going to have a chance to play through on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, Olivier Vernon had a bad wrist earlier in the year, and he wasn't getting, the push off the tackle that he's doing now, and that he's getting now. And Damon Harris in the middle has played well all year, and Janoris Jenkins has been terrific all year. But it's amazing what $200 million can buy you, and it bought him a defense. And Spags, who the people in Baltimore know from his couple of years there with the Ravens. I think he's a really good coach, and he just got into some bad situations. after he left the Giants following the 2008 season. He went to the Rams and wasn't very good as the head coach, but the Rams haven't been very good in a long time, despite who the head coach is.
Most people thought he was going to be a good head coach, right? I mean, look, McDaniels is going to get another shot. Jimmy Schwartz. Yeah. There's a lot of these guys that were the hot guy. Adam Gase was that guy last. And for some, it really is a talent issue, right, Gary? I mean, you've been doing this a long, long time. Good luck to anybody taking over that 49er train wreck right now. Or some of the other places where they just don't have football players.
Well, I think what happened with McDaniels in Denver, a lot of that was his fault because he tried to be Belichick. They had some talent on that team. Jay Cutler was early in his career, and Brandon Marshall was there. They had some decent players. The thing that happened with Spags in St. Louis is they just didn't have any talent. And I don't care who you are, if there's no talent on the team, you just can't win. And then he went to New Orleans in the year that Sean Payton was suspended, and they had a historically bad defense. They just didn't have any players. They still can't play defense. And again, it doesn't matter who the coordinator is there. They just can't play defense in New Orleans. I'm not really sure what he did in Baltimore for a couple of years. I know it kind of was.
He was really behind the scenes. I mean, not heard from ever. I saw him around the building a little bit, but it wasn't. It was not a out in front role for sure. But I know I know Harbaugh's affinity and their relationship, their friendship, which a lot of people are questioning about Marty Morningwig around here. I mean, Harbaugh's loyal. That's a Harbaugh, right? I mean, and all of the Morningwigs, the Castillos, Spagnuolo. I mean, John's been loyal to that whole Andy Reid group.
Right. And I think Spags is a really good coach. And then he comes to the Giants last year, and it was the worst defensive year in team history. So now you're saying, all right, they're changing Coughlin, and one of the first things that McAdoo does is he decides to keep Spags. And people were questioning that. Like, why would you keep this guy? And the Giants knew what kind of coach he was because with players in 2007 and 2008, the Giants had a terrific defense. So they went out and got him players, and we get to vote. I want to have one of the 50 votes for the AP All-Pro team and then the different awards that they give out. And one of the new awards that they started a couple of years ago was the Assistant Coach of the Year, and I gave it to him because it's never worked before where you can bring in free agents, high-priced free agents, and win a championship or win a division or get in the playoffs. We saw what happened, in Philadelphia a few years ago. We saw what happened in Washington in 2000, that you just can't buy the Super Bowl. Well, the difference in this case was the Giants spent their money on players, ascending players, not guys like Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders like they did in Washington who had already played their best football. All the guys that they signed were young guys on the way up. And then it was just up to Spags to, keep the arrow pointing upwards, and he's done that. And working so many new faces into a defense in 1 year is a very difficult thing to do. So the Giants' defense is for real. I'm telling you, I'm shocked. I have to admit it that I just didn't think it was going to work so quickly, but they're really good.
Well, at least they didn't go down to Miami for New Year's Eve. Gary Myers joining us here for the New York Daily News. He is Gary Myers, NYDN, and, of course, has written the Brady Manning book, and we're going to get into his next book in a minute. Last thing for you on this, I don't know that anybody's really giving Atlanta or Kansas City any, real chance, even though they're taking the week off. And some of these teams, especially in the AFC side with the injuries in Oakland and the Houston quarterback situation, the Miami quarterback situation, it feels like Pittsburgh's a real team. But it feels like this Sunday game, the Giants in Green Bay, you can make a case that one of those teams, the winner, could go and create noise. And certainly, as much as we put Dallas up on a pedestal, the Giants are the one team they don't want to see come down there and dance on the star 2 weeks from now, right?
Yeah, let's assume that Seattle beats Detroit. Then the winner of the Giants-Packers game goes to Dallas. And either one of those teams could beat the Cowboys. Now, the big story, if it's the Giants, will be, well, can they beat the Cowboys 3 times in one season? And back in 2007, when the Cowboys were in a similar situation as the number 1 seed, they beat the Giants twice this season. The Giants went and beat them in the playoffs. But, my answer to that, Nestor, is it hard to beat a team 3 times in one season? Yes. But the Giants will have to beat them 3 times on that one day. They just got to beat them once. and they can certainly do that. The two games they played against them this year, they won by a total of 4 points, so it's not like they dominated them. But and then Green Bay, certainly, if Green Bay beats the Giants, then it's 7 in a row for them. And if they beat the Giants, it means that Aaron Rodgers had another great game. He's got 15 touchdowns and no interceptions in that 6-0 streak. So I think that unless the Cowboys get lucky and Detroit beats Seattle, and then Detroit goes to Dallas, where they didn't play very well a couple weeks ago, then I think the Cowboys' first playoff game will be a problem for them. I'm not saying they're going to lose, but either one of those teams, the Giants or Green Bay, will give them a very hard time.
Gary Myers, I know you've been all over the league. You've seen these cold games and warm games. I got the Green Bay weather up here for Sunday. Mostly sunny. That's the good part. High of 15 on Sunday. You know, how the Giants going to play in those kind? I mean, I remember Tom Coughlin's face almost froze off at one point, right? Remember that? I mean, it was sort of like the last scene in The Shining with Jack Nicholson, right?
Well, the wind chill that day, that was January of 2008. The wind chill was minus 23.
That's all.
I've never in my life experienced cold like that, and I just don't know how those guys played a 3-hour football game with only a 12-minute break to warm up at halftime. Actually, it went longer than that because it was an overtime game. That was probably the best game of Eli's career, considering the conditions. He didn't throw any interceptions. He outplayed Brett Favre. Plexico Burress had a monster game. Eli himself is not concerned, I guarantee you, about going to play in 15-degree weather. I'm not sure what the wind chill is going to be, but most likely it won't be minus 23. So, and they went back in the playoffs in 2011 and beat the Packers. And I came up with this. I call it this kind of a fun stat where Eli Manning has the same number of playoff victories at Lambeau Field as Aaron Rodgers. They each have 2.
Wow.
And Rodgers is 2-2. Eli is 2-0. And they beat him pretty easily in the 2011 season when the Packers were 15-1, and Rodgers, had a tremendous season. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a field goal game. I'm terrible at picking winners in this stuff, but the best I can do is say I think it's going to be a really close, competitive game, and it's going to be the best game of the weekend.
You've covered the league for a long, long time. This is always the toughest week of the year, right? Especially for those of us who know coaches. And, I know Rex Ryan and Rob Ryan. And, I don't feel sorry for guys walking away from the game or whatever with $30, $40, $50 million in a TV gig. But this is a time where the shell game and distracted assistant coaches and agents are on the phone trying to get my guy an interview in Jacksonville or in Buffalo or in San Francisco. And, other than the Denver job, these are all the usual suspects, right? I mean, there are franchises like San Francisco, like Cleveland, that are just poorly run, and other places like Jacksonville and the Rams now out there where, the fish is stunk from the head down from the beginning, where they don't have good football players, right? Literally.
Yeah. These jobs tend to come open, pretty frequently, and the Rams job, that's the most attractive to me because they have that new stadium opening in a few years.
Yeah, if you can make it there, right? Can you hold it? Will the new guy have the job when they walk on the new field? That's a hell of a question, but, my odds are less than 50-50 on that, right? That somebody's going to make it 3-4 years in that system out there, right?
Well, they're saying the stadium's going to open in 2019, so that means you just got to make it to the third year of your contract, which is no given. Right. I give you that. It's not a given. And I think anybody who takes that job's got to be a big believer in Jared Goff. And, he's going to be there for a while. Obviously, they gave up so much to get him, and he's only played, say, half a season. I was not impressed by what I saw, but that is the most attractive job. It is L.A. They had, a potential franchise quarterback there. It is an exciting market. San Francisco is just a mess. Cleveland is a mess. They're letting analytics people run the operation there. I think they need to get back to having football scouts make the choices. Denver's an interesting situation. They still have a Super Bowl defense. They don't have a quarterback. that I think you can really go very far with yet. Maybe Paxton Lynch will turn out to be that guy. I don't think it'll be Trevor Siemian. So, yeah, you're right. And then, Buffalo, no quarterback, and it's Buffalo, and I mean, I went to school in upstate New York at Syracuse, and I have a lot of great memories of that, that time in my life. But, quite frankly, the only coaches that go to Buffalo are the ones that don't have any other options and that they really want to be head coaches. That's what happened to Rex 2 years ago. He really wanted the Atlanta job and didn't get it, but he didn't want to sit out and wait to see what opened up the following year. So he took the Buffalo job, and it turned out that his instincts were right. That's not the job that he wanted, and they don't have a quarterback either. So the good jobs really don't usually come open very often, and there's a reason for that. Denver is one of the few that you can say this is a really good job, because you got John Elway, who is the epitome of a football guy running it. And that he'll figure out the quarterback situation. He was right about Brock Osweiler, but the rest of them, have been graveyards for coaches.
He is Gary Myers. You can follow his journey at nydailynews.com, as well as out on Twitter at Gary Myers, NYDN. His book is Brady versus Manning, the untold story of the rivalry that transformed the NFL. We've talked about that book, but you're working on another book for the spring, right? And this includes our Jersey Joe, Joe Flacco, about fathers and quarterbacks, and I'm sure the Manning family factors into that. And I don't know much about Tom Brady's dad or their family or football, but every quarterback, behind every quarterback, there's a dad who probably loves football, right?
Yeah, I mean, and different relationships and interesting relationships in each of the stories that I'm going to tell, and I'm really hoping this opens up a new market for me with kids, because I think that the middle school and the high school kids who are athletes will learn a lot of life lessons from, how John Elway was with his dad, and how Joe Flacco has been with his father, and Eli and Archie, and specifically with Archie and how he dealt with having a third son who had great athletic ability. And, I have Derek Carr in there, and Jameis Winston and Jim Harbaugh and John Elway. So lots of, really good stories in this book that I think people enjoy reading.
Hey, I can't wait to talk to you more about that, because, I know a lot of these people. I know Jim Harbaugh and Jack Harbaugh. Joe Flacco, his dad was at the first press conference, when he was signed. And I remember talking to Steve Flacco and his background. And, now that Joe's become sort of iconic here, this is a tough time for the Ravens, Gary. I mean, Bisciotti's got to do another press conference next week. And now 3 out of 4 years they haven't made the playoffs. And, Harbaugh says he's keeping his staff and, kind of going all in what could be sort of a final year for Harbaugh if this thing doesn't go well next year. We haven't had that around here in Baltimore much.
No, I know, and John's been there for a while, and the Billick thing kind of ended abruptly 8 or so years ago when they only give him a contract extension the year before. I think regardless of what happens in Baltimore next year, it'd be pretty foolish for Steve Bisciotti to change coaches. I think a lot of John Harbaugh, he just needs to get himself a really good creative offensive coordinator. Have they made the decision on Morningwood yet?
Well, the word is he's back. Yeah, I mean, that's what John said. We thought Gary Kubiak wasn't going anywhere a couple of years. I mean, it's all up in the air. This is the busiest couple of weeks of the year for all these coordinators to try to figure out where they want to sit, right?
Yeah, I mean, Morningwood has had varied success in his coaching career. I'm not sure that he's a cutting-edge offensive coach that you want, to try to get Flacco back on track to where he was, 4 years ago. But, I do trust John Harbaugh's judgment, and I think that ultimately he'll make the right decision.
Gary, great having you on, man. I appreciate the time. Stay warm out there in Green Bay. Don't freeze on the way to Houston. We'll see you down at Super Bowl 51 in a couple weeks.
Okay, Nestor. I look forward to it. Take care.
Appreciate you. Gary Myers, good man from the New York Daily News, a longtime NFL columnist, and has written many, many books, Coaching Confidential, The Catch, all that good stuff. You can Google him and find him out on Twitter at Gary Myers, NYDN. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. You can also find me at nasty at WNST.net. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and of course we stream live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I'm wearing my Caps hat. I got my Free the Bird shirt on. We're almost to Sarasota in a couple of weeks. We're doing Super Bowl 51 in Houston. I'll be watching football all weekend long. I'm going to the Terps-Indiana game. I was at the Caps game this week. I'm hitting a Wizards game next week. So there's a lot of things going on around here. Plenty to talk about. I know it sucks when the Ravens aren't playing games in these weekends in January. We got our big London trip. We're doing Green Bay, Nashville, Minnesota next year. So we got road trip information up. You can buy the London trip at $100 off per person right now. And I am Nestor, and this is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.